as a seller, you hear it all the time. Well, we need to provide value, right? We need to be focused on them. We need to do this. We need to do that. But it's like, okay, great. What does that mean? Like, give me some.
Exactly.
Give me some tactics.
Right. Well, but let's start with the mindset first, right?
Yeah, please.
So the mindset is, we need to provide them value.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But so how do they denominate value? How do they measure value? Well, progress. Right. So if we know that progress is value, then we have to be very intentional about how we provide the value. And so I write about in my book is, look, you need to create a very simple, what I call value plan for every interaction you plan to have with the buyer. So if you're a sales leader and you're going to say you're going to do a pipeline review with a seller, you're going to go through their list of qualified opportunities.
Yeah.
And for each opportunity, the seller needs to be answered two simple questions.
Okay.
What does the buyer need from us in this next interaction to help them move closer to making a decision? And as a result of receiving that from us, what steps will they commit to take? And if a seller can't answer those basic questions about every opportunity in their pipeline, then they need to take a step back. More discovery needs to be done.
Right.
More questions need to be asked. More trust needs to be built so they can earn the right to get the answers they need.
Yeah.
So in my book, I talk about, the opposite of selling out is selling in. There's 4 pillars of selling in: connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. Now, these are innately human behaviors that drive this buyer-centric way of selling, which also, by the way, executed properly, compresses decision cycles, going to increase your win rates.
Yeah.
So start with connection. Connection. We are wired to connect, right? As humans, we're wired to connect with other people.
Absolutely.
We want to do that. Through doing that, we're going to build some level of trust with the buyer. Everybody talks about trust, but why is the trust important? Well, trust is important because when we ask our questions, when we deploy our curiosity, in the absence of trust, do we get the answers we want?
Right.
No.
Definitely not.
No. You're going to get the same superficial answers they'd give some stranger off the street.
Exactly right.
Right? So we need to build that level of trust through that connection.
Getting comfortable in like situations, not in this mock call, right? Like these little micro things that build up a foundation that you can use.
I am so glad you brought that to light for so many reasons. So what you're describing is called deep and deliberate practice. And the science of behavioral change and skill development, as well as neuroscience, backs everything that you just said, which is that if you go slowly and deeply, making mistakes, stumbling, doubling back and making corrections, that is where you most effectively develop your neurological circuitry, because it's not about in practice proving that you can play the game, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's about building the awareness and muddling through so that when things speed up, you've got more skill. And that's exactly what we encourage in the lab. So in our objection handling lab, we have a 6-step framework that we teach, but we're really encouraging people to muddle through. It starts when you receive an objection by welcoming it and actually connecting with a beat of gratitude that your prospect told you something that's on their mind rather than ghosting you. So it's not just like, okay, I completely understand. It's like, hey, I really, really appreciate the transparency, or I'm really glad you brought that up.
Right.
Step 1. Okay.
Right.
Step 2, this one can be challenging. We empathize, but not validate. And that is a very tough line for people to toe. And I'll give you a demonstration. And this was one of the chief. Okay. So someone, and this is going to be a bit of an exaggerated version, but let's say someone says, we're going to go with your competitor. Your price is too high, right? Validating an example might be, you're right. Our price is too high, right? An empathetic statement might be, it would make sense that as you're evaluating different options, price is going to be something you're thinking about.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a tough line to toe, right? Or we're going to go with a competitor. I'm trying to think of what a validation of that, but an empathizing statement would be, I've got to say, I'm really glad to hear that as you're thinking so seriously about finding a vendor, you're talking to a lot of different people. Like it's rewarding. It's rewarding what they're saying in the context of the buying decision. And that is really hard to come up with on the fly. And that is a step in the practice lab where we're like, guys, take your time, muddle through, like try a couple at bats, see which one feels right. And then when you get to one and your partner says, yeah, that one actually felt real, like write it down, right? And then use that to practice and refine and then turn it into game speed when you're on the phone with your prospects. But the time in the lab is to slow down and build awareness.
How does a sales leader then tap into someone's internal motivation versus only using those external carrots, right? Is that what you're saying? Is that kind of the role that the sales leader should be doing, is focusing there as opposed to just a commission check or the fear of missing a quota or whatever it may be?
Very much so. So there's a couple thoughts here. First off, there are people out there who very easily tune into their internal motivation. That's the center of their lives and how they live, right? There's other people out there who more extensively tap into external motivation, and that's how they drive themselves. Yeah. I don't know if there's a better and a worse way of doing it, but there are side effects based on which you choose. And with the sales profession being so heavily slated on the commission side of payout, it tends to attract people who are the externally motivated folks. And it tends to only retain people who like that external motivation side of things. And one of the side effects of that is that you have a whole sales force full of people who generally, by and large, are more interested in the dollar and the commission check than anything else. I won't say more interested, but that's a pretty heavy motivator for them, right? Whereas there's some people who would much rather be motivated and tend to live their lives more in alignment with their internal motivation, and they tend to struggle in sales, right? The type of people who maybe they do well, maybe they do poorly, but they typically don't stick in it for life because it's just not healthy for them, and they leave and go somewhere else. So part of the problem stems back to that commission structure. If that was changed, you could have an entirely different sales crew who behave entirely differently. However, even folks who are in sales today, even folks who have learned to live with the external motivation piece, there still is an internal motivation piece that could be there that's not there. So they're kind of firing on 6 cylinders, right? Or on 3 cylinders rather than all 6, I guess. So as far as how to tap into that internal motivation, I think that absolutely should be part of every manager's onboarding process, right? With a new hire, it should definitely be part of the one-on-ones. It should be part of quarterly business reviews, right? And figuring out, why does this matter to you? For some people, maybe they're working for a company that's really mission driven and they also believe in the mission. Right. And they really want to sell more of these software packages because they truly believe every time a company buys the software, the world gets a little bit better. That could be it. Or maybe it ties into their personal goals, right? Maybe somebody wants to be able to live a certain lifestyle or own property or move somewhere or afford to have kids. And this job taps into that, right? Money is a piece of that, of course, but I would still consider that the internal motivation piece. Additionally, human beings are very motivated by mastery and the sense of accomplishment and becoming better at things, right? We love that feeling. And that is completely ignored in sales motivation, completely. No one taps into that and uses that. So I would say if I had reps to work with, right, I would find out what is their why, right? Why does each sale excite them? Is it about their personal life and what the commission means to them? Or is it about the impact they're having on the world, right? And the fact that company bought the software means that those companies' employees will be better off or the customers will be better off, right? So what is that why? How does it tie into their goals and their vision of the world? And then, tap into the mastery piece, right? What do you want to get better at? Like, why would you not sit down with a rep and ask them, what do you want to be a master at? Do you want to be a total Jedi in negotiation? Do you want to be amazing at disarming people and getting them to trust you? Do you want to be a total wizard of like writing compelling outreach that gets people to pay attention, right? Like, what do you want to be good at? And then let's set a course of how you become good at that and become a true master at that.
What are some of the things that you might be able to offer people to start thinking about around how they integrate sales?
I think what has happened and why it's becoming more popular again the last 2 years is I think SaaS has become so dominant now, right? That everybody knows software as a service, right? So it's not like it has SaaS has matured, right? And what that means is we can start going a bit more into the product routes, we don't have to compete against the service companies. We're often competing against other SaaS companies now, right? And that means you can now allow people to do what was actually intended, that they just use your software and don't need to always speak with a salesperson or customer success to use your product. So I think really product-led growth is this kind of mindset that you always think product first in everything you do, right? It's really a culture in your company where you think product first in everything you do. So if you are the marketing team, you think, okay, how do we build a traction model that involves the product? If you are in the sales or customer success and product, you think about how do we build a sales and customer success model that involves the product and where the product does most of the legwork, really. Having said that, it's not really that product-led growth is reducing the need to have sales and customer success involved in certain aspects, but it's not removing the need. I would say it's changing the role of sales and customer success to basically be a bit different. And I think it's definitely something that it's still a journey that many companies are going through and trying to figure out what does that actually mean, right? For me, it's really about in a product-led model. So in the old sales-led model, you were always like this, right? Go to a SaaS site, book a demo. You maybe talk to an AE, or maybe even you speak with an SDR.
Exactly right.
You have to do another call with an AE.
It's clumsy.
Then you have multiple meetings, and then you get, maybe when you make a decision, then you get to try the product, but you get onboarded by a customer success manager. And so it's a lot of meetings and a lot of the product is not front and center, right? And in a product-led model, you're putting the product first and center. So you typically would maybe have a free trial or freemium or some sort of experience with the product that the users can try. And then they can kind of sometimes end up buying without speaking with anybody, or sales and or customer success or whoever you have in that role will step in and support that buying journey, right? But the product becomes the first experience with your product. Basically, it's not a meeting; it's the product itself. So the way I look at sales role in this is really to be a bit more, how can you put it, reactive and data driven, right? It's reactive, more like data driven. You have to be like, if you have like 100 users who signs up, right? Let's say maybe 20% or 30% of them will just buy self-service, right? I'm just making up numbers right now. They'll buy self-service. They don't even need to speak with anybody. And then you'll have some that will reach out themselves, and they will kind of, reach out to you, and in that way it becomes like a sales process. Sales gets involved because they're actively reaching out to you. But often what they reach out with is really questions, right? It becomes a whole other conversation, because they're reaching out with concrete questions about like the product. Can it do this? Can it fulfill this scenario, and so on? So it actually becomes a much better conversation, instead of like doing a generic demo and then talking about that, right? It becomes an actual conversation about use cases, and stuff like that, which is actually better for sales, right? Because then you can better sell those use cases and present the product. And then the last bucket, I would say, is the ones that don't end up buying themselves, and also don't reach out. And for them, you can say some of those are still potential buyers, and maybe their sales can do some data analysis, or you can use tools to look at, did they show some kind of buying intent in the product, despite them never ending up buying, that justifies that we should maybe give them a bit of a push, right? Reach out to them manually, maybe on LinkedIn or whatever, to get them engaged, right? So there you can say, sales can go in and be that extra touch of actually reaching out directly because this customer showed some kind of buying intent. but in general, you leave it up to the customer a bit more to actually decide how they want to approach this, and it's not so kind of pushy.
You have to make sure that when you're, and I wasn't personally responsible for building out our partners team here, but I know that's something we think a lot about. It's something that Steve thinks a lot about is, again, eliminating friction, making it easy for reps to bring partners in on deals, thinking about ways that we can retire quota differently, and maybe it's not forever, right? But just to get things off the ground, to get those conversations started. So yes, there are absolutely incentive and compensation elements to that, quota retirement, commissions, et cetera. But it does also, comp isn't the only lever there. And you as a leader, to your point, it's my responsibility. It's Steve, Amy, Michelle, our whole leadership team. It's our responsibility to coach our AEs on how to think about our relationship with partners and how to think about the potential benefits and the wins for our customer. And again, I always go back to this idea, like if you're just doing what's best for the customer, and you're like, and that is the North Star, that is the focus, everything else tends to fall into place.